Great Entrepreneur, sponsored by the Georgetown University Alumni Association, Alumni Career Services, and the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Sarah Hay, Assistant Director of Alumni Career Services, and our presenter today is Marcus Howard, founder of Entomology, Inc., and a graduate of Georgetown in '07. We were very excited. We had almost 300 alums sign up for this presentation, and many of you are dialing in now, so we're so happy you can join us. Before we begin, I'd like to just share a few housekeeping tips and reminders. Today's presentation is being recorded, and you can access the replay of this webinar within 3 business days on our YouTube channel. To access, simply go to youtube.com and search Georgetown Alumni Career Services, and I'll also send out the link directly in the chat area. There are 2 audio options. You can listen via your computer speakers or dial into the conference bridge number provided. Participants are not required to have a headset, but you are welcome to use one. It is important to note if you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this can be caused by having multiple software applications open. Feel free to close some of these applications or simply join us via the conference bridge number provided in your reminder email. Questions are welcome. Please type your questions into the question area on your GoToWebinar control panel screen, and Marcus will plan to answer as many questions as time will allow during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. Afterwards, I will email everyone a copy of his slides, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please submit those concerns to me via the chat area if possible, or you can visit the GoToWebinar helpline. Without further ado, I'd like to tell you a bit more about our presenter today. For just under a decade, Marcus Howard has been one of the country's premier authorities on the psychology of leadership, entrepreneurship, and personal development. While attending Georgetown, he studied under some of the most focused and successful mentors, which included psychologists, successful entrepreneurs, and college professors, while spending over 10,000 additional man-hours independently studying psychology, personal development, leadership, and behavior change. As an author, coach, and serial entrepreneur, he has helped thousands of 20-somethings on 5 continents unleash their untapped potential and bridge the gap between who they are now and who they want to be. He was honored by Georgetown University as an award recipient for the commitment to campus community. Marcus and his company are actively involved in humanitarian projects such as the Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative with the United States Agency for International Development, has advertised the leadership team of Congressman Ed Towns of the United States House of Representatives, and has worked with many members of the entertainment industry. A true advocate for helping others achieve their own level of success, Marcus is true. We're really excited to present Marcus and have him here today. Especially, I don't know if all of you know, but today is the Georgetown City Challenge. It just launched at noon, and it will be going on for the next 24 hours. We are trying to raise money for Georgetown scholarships, and 8 cities are competing to see who can raise the most funds for scholarships. So if you're in one of the 8 participating cities, or if you would just like to adopt a city and fund them in the challenge, visit georgetown.citychallenge.edu, or I'm sorry, it's citychallenge.georgetown.edu. I will send that link out as well. But anyway, it's very fitting that we have someone like Marcus here on the same day. So Marcus, I will now turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So when I was at Georgetown, I had a professor who did something that was really cool that I want to try on this presentation. When we ever started class, he would always ask a question at the beginning of class. And what he would do is, for the people who showed up on time, if you could answer the question throughout the class, then he would give you extra credit. So I really want to try something here because I know that not everyone has showed up. So the people who did show up on time, because I just moved to LA where everyone's late, so for the people who just showed up on time, I want to present to you a question that you can then answer in the questions box that we have here. And the first person to answer correctly, what I think I'm going to do is give like a $50 Amazon gift certificate. So that's what I would do. Here's the question. Entrepreneurship, right, becoming a great entrepreneur, it's not about money. It's not about, but it is about something that starts with an M. So entrepreneurship is not about money, but the word that it is about, becoming a great entrepreneur, starts with an M. If you can tell me what that is before I say it throughout the presentation, then the first person that does it gets a $50 gift certificate to Amazon. So I want to thank you so much for coming to this presentation. What I decided to do when I got asked by Georgetown to do this talk on, what the classroom doesn't teach, how to become a great entrepreneur, one of the first things that I wanted to do is not to have it be just about me. Because I don't really think that anybody would want to sit on the line for 45 minutes and hear somebody, what would be quote unquote bragging about, entrepreneurship in their journey. That's not what I'm about. That's not what Georgetown is about. So it's particularly what I want to do. And what we did do is we actually sponsored a study by the Empire Research Group, and it was done under the direction of Dr. Primacy Boca, who is both a PhD and a he's got his master's degree in business. He's got his MBA, and he put a lot of great information in here, and we've been looking at it, and we've been going over it for the past few weeks, because what I really want to do in this particular presentation is give you data, give you things that are based upon the numbers and things that you can actually start using today. So before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit about why we commissioned this particular study. Again, I told you I wanted to be data-driven. But one of the interesting things that we noticed when we were doing the research for this particular presentation is that of the entrepreneurs that we interviewed, as well as of the data that we've seen, 65% of entrepreneurs believe that they are going to perform in the top 20% of all entrepreneurs, and essentially being a great one. But see, the math of it being 65% but only 25% is doing it is inherent. It's a statistical improbability. It's actually impossible to do. So not everyone can be in the top. And so what I wanted to do is, because I went to Georgetown, I love Georgetown, I'm a Hoya, I will be a Hoya for life. What I want to do is put this presentation together, and we commissioned this report so that we can give the hometown Hoyas a leg up on different things that you can know for the different traits of how you can ultimately become a great entrepreneur. So let me just get this really quickly out of the way. I know that Sarah did a very great introduction of who I am. So I'm just going to give you some quick greatest hits. Again, I'm Marcus Howard. I came out the college of '08. I was not a business school person, although I did love the business school classes that I was able to take. I started my first business when I was 18 years old. I was in Harbin. My room number was 805. It was me and my roommate, David Tate, and we started our first business there. It was an e-commerce business. It lasted for maybe a total of 5.5, 6 months before it ultimately failed. But it was a good experience that we used, and it's helped me to start so many more businesses. The things that I've learned from that situation have kind of helped me. So I've gotten my start as an entrepreneur at Georgetown, and you'll see that there are plenty of other things that I love about Georgetown that has helped me. Currently, what I do today is my company, Entomology. We work with under 30 CEOs, and what we do is we help them to bridge the gap between who they are now and who they truly want to be. So we run into a lot of entrepreneurs who are just coming out of college or just starting their own business, and they may not have the best roadmap, or they may not have access to the best mentors. And they usually come to us and they talk to us and they tell us about their business idea, and we directly work with them to make sure that, okay, we know what your goals are. We want to help you put a plan to get there. And here's how you can do it, and then we go ahead and we hold them accountable. So it's one of the great things that we're doing now. And it's one of the extensions of why we're ultimately doing this presentation, because if there is a Hoya who's out here who's just starting their own business, or if there's a Hoya out here who already has a business, but you spend more time working in your business than on your business, then I believe that this presentation is going to be pretty good. Now, the last thing I do want to say, and I want to get this out the way, is I don't claim to be a great entrepreneur. I work with a lot of great entrepreneurs. I would say that I'm a pretty good one, but I'm not a great one yet. But from the data that we have in the study for the traits of great entrepreneurs and other great entrepreneurs that we interviewed, I think that there would be a lot of value that comes from this presentation. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover the current landscape for entrepreneurs in 2014 based off the research that we've seen. Of that data, we're going to look at the top traits of successful entrepreneurs so that you can start using some of these traits, adopting some of these traits so that you can apply them to your own business, because that's the biggest thing that I want to make sure that we have is our action steps and things that you can do today to apply to your own business. Because then what is the other point of you spending an hour talking to us on the phone and then, or on this webinar today? And then lastly, we're going to expose the common myths and roadblocks that are keeping people from becoming a great entrepreneur. So Sarah did a great job on the rules. Let me just go ahead and get the last little housekeeping out the way. We will do questions at the end. This presentation is only about 40 to 45 minutes, so we will have time to do it at the end. If you do have a question, I want to make sure that you put it in the questions box, though, so don't forget. So a lot of times people want to hold the question to the end. You can put it in the question box. Sarah will be there. She'll hold them all together, and then we'll do a kind of Q&A at the end because I want to make sure that you don't forget. And then this last one isn't a rule, more is a suggestion. If I were you right now, usually when I do webinars or when I'm attending a webinar, I spend a lot of time on Facebook just because sometimes. So I'm just asking, if you can take a break from Facebook, I think this will ultimately even help your business. Of course, you don't have to, but I think this would be something that's good. So let's look at the entrepreneurial landscape for individuals in 2014. Of all the people that we studied, we probably talked to, me and my team, about 1,200 different entrepreneurs. Plus, we did some things with Startup Labs. We did some things with Y Combinator. We interviewed some of those guys who interviewed thousands upon thousands of more entrepreneurs. And here are the 5 things that we found for reasons why people want to be great entrepreneurs. The first one is, I think it's not a surprise here, right? People want to solve an important problem. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who get into the business because they have a problem that they want to solve, whether they're a social entrepreneur, whether there were things that were going on in their family. Maybe there was something in a business that they were in that they saw that they could be done better. And so they ultimately saw something that they want to solve, and they started one. Another reason is they want to capitalize on an original business idea. This usually comes from highly creative entrepreneurs, people who start new businesses that we haven't heard before, as well as other entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos, who started Amazon, or the guys who started Google, like something original that people are ultimately working on. The third reason, which is a lot of the solo entrepreneurs is what I want to say, and a lot of young entrepreneurs do the same thing as well, is you want to be your own boss. And I can absolutely understand that. You want to be able to have autonomy. Me personally, I've never worked for someone before in terms of having a job in my life. I've always worked for myself as an entrepreneur, or been the head of whatever team or project that I've been on. So I'm in that same category of I want to be my own boss. I kind of like the autonomy of walking in the room and me being able to tell people, for me to be able to dictate the agenda today, or a lot of times when you're an entrepreneur, your customers dictate the agenda, but for you to be the leader, which is great. The biggest one that I've seen, especially talking with entrepreneurs, and I came back from my 5-year reunion, I want to say that was in October, Sarah and I were talking about, and this was one of the biggest things. I think a lot of people are forced into entrepreneurship because they can't find a damn job in this economy. I mean, we spent, Georgetown is expensive, and then you come out and you realize that there aren't that many jobs, or even that there are jobs out there that you're underqualified for, so you want to move into something else. And this is one of the biggest things. You can't find a job in the economy, so we're forced to do entrepreneurs. Now, the most surprising one to me was this last one, which is build wealth. And it wasn't surprising to me because I know most entrepreneurs want to build wealth, so I don't think it's that. But what we consistently saw was that building wealth was about the 3rd or 4th most important thing on everyone's list. A lot of people, they have this assumption when they're talking to entrepreneurs, it's, oh, every entrepreneur is out here to get rich. Don't get me wrong. Great entrepreneurs love money, but that's not the reason why they are ultimately getting up every day, because if you're becoming a slave to money, a lot of times if you're trying to build wealth and that's the only motivation that you have, a lot of times things kind of fizzle out. But we'll talk about that continued in this presentation. But let's talk about entrepreneurship by the numbers first. There are 512,000 new companies that are created each month. Now, again, there are some under 30 CEOs on the line, people who are just coming out as entrepreneurs. And I can tell you that 29% of those, or about 116,000 businesses a month, are started by people under 30. That's a huge number of businesses that are started on a monthly basis, a couple million in a year. 90% of those, in fact, are actually self-funded or bootstrapped. So they've taken their own personal savings, or they've taken a small amount of money and they're trying to bring their number in for revenue. The problem with that, though, with a lot of self-started businesses or self-funded businesses is, and this is the number, 99.78% fail within 3 years. Now, we all know the statistic where they say, 90% of businesses fail after a year or 2 years or something like that. But I've never seen this number this high. And this comes from Startup Labs, and this comes from Y Combinator, and we also got this from we got some data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a big number. So then I started to ask myself when we were doing this research, okay, well, what about venture-backed CEOs then? If it's just with, people who have, who are self-funded or bootstrapped, what about the people who are making more money? But what we're realizing is it doesn't matter where you're self-funded or you have an entrepreneurship. Only 95% of businesses we didn't know ever produce revenue over $1 million in a year. Now, the crazy thing is, of that 0.8%, so 0.8 of all 100%, so that's 99.2% don't do this, but 0.8 ever reach 5 million. And then the number was actually so small that we couldn't put it on the graph, but it's a percentage of a percentage. So 1.8% of 0.8% ever reach $10 million in a year. And that's interesting because when we look at the venture-backed numbers, we see that, again, we would think that when you had more money, that this would probably help you in terms of how to become a great entrepreneur, how to have a successful company, how to run a successful team. But even if you're a venture-backed CEO, when we say venture-backed, we mean $500,000 or more that you have in an investment, 7 in 10 of those still fail. And of that, 60% of those are dead by the age of 3. So their company doesn't exist anymore. Before it was 99.8 with no money. Even with venture-backed, it was 68. And 35% are dead by the age of 10. Now, I know I've spit a lot of numbers at you right now, and I don't really like math that much either, so I want to give you a little bit of perspective of what this means. Originally, we said that under 30 CEOs, there are about 116,000 new businesses that are started each month. Do you know the number of businesses of that 116,000 that are actually going to ever reach, whether they have funding or not, $10 million in revenue? The answer is actually 1. There will just be one company of the 116,000 that started this month, where there's going to be one entrepreneur, and I'm included in there because I haven't gotten to 10 million yet. There's going to be one entrepreneur that's on this call that's actually going to reach that point of hitting $10 million in revenue. So you have to ask yourself then, if funding isn't a predictor of greatness, then what is? What are the different things that we can use to start really becoming a great entrepreneur? Now, I want to talk about that, and that's going to be what the rest of this presentation is about. But first, I want to start with the definitions, some few definitions that give us all a common language that we can use, because that's going to be a lot easier. The first word that I want to define specifically so that we all have a common language is entrepreneur. But before I do that, I just want to do something really quickly. So when I was a student at Georgetown, and some of the older entrepreneurs, or some that have been in the 90s, if you're on this call, you may not have gotten this. But when I was in Georgetown in the 2000s, professors used to talk to us all the time. And they used to tell us, Wikipedia is not a sufficient source. It's not a credible source. It's not a scholarly source for the papers that you want to use. Well, I've already graduated. I've already got my degree. I've already got my receipt. And I use Wikipedia all the time, and I'm an entrepreneur now. So I'll tell you, Wikipedia says that an entrepreneur is defined as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerative initiative and risk. Now, the thing that I want to focus on here is especially a business. So an entrepreneur is a person who organizes any enterprise with considerable risk. Now, let's talk about what a business is. The best definition that I've seen for a business, and there are many out there, I actually got from Josh Kaufman, who wrote the book, The Personal MBA. Now, this particular webinar is about entrepreneurship, but there are great presentations that have been in the Georgetown Alumni Career Service webinar that talks about business. And he has a great definition. He has a great book. You can go check his book on Amazon. But his definition is a series of systems that, 1, creates or provides something of value, that 2, other people want or need, 3, at a price they're willing to pay for, in a way that 4, satisfies the purchaser's needs and expectations, and provides sufficient revenue to make it worthwhile for the owners to continue operating business. And for me, that was the best definition I've seen, because it gives you something that is truly measurable, especially when you're just starting a business. No one tells you the different things that you're going to need to do. No one's going to tell you the extra responsibilities that you're going to have. So I like this as a working definition, because usually when we work with entrepreneurs, we just go through this checklist. Do you have something that people actually value? Do you have something that they want? Are you priced comparably? Are you bringing in enough revenue? Those certain questions that we actually ask ourselves all the time that has truly been helpful in growing and generating and in bringing in new business. So now that we all have working definitions, now that we know that we want to move forward into the different things, again, I'm telling you, being a great entrepreneur, at least from what we found and from the data that we have, it's not about building wealth. It's not about money. There's another M word in there. And I haven't been able to see the questions yet, but hopefully someone gets it. But it's about something else. And so there are so many traits that we hear of that, that people say you need to be action-oriented, you need to be a leader, you need to be passionate, you need to be a great networker, you need to have people skills, you need to be lucky. There are so many traits that we have seen, but we have talked to entrepreneurs who, for this particular study, who had done 10 million and above, but then 10 million wasn't even our number that we were looking for in terms of greatness. But the traits that we've seen of entrepreneurs who are really out here rocking it, both in the United States as well as abroad, there have been a number of different traits that all come together for all of these consistent entrepreneurs, and they are here. They usually have a combination of professional experience, positive and creative thinking, fluid intelligence, flexibility, and resourcefulness. And so what I want to do is just take a little time to go through each one of these. The first one I want to say is professional experience. From the data that we have, and we looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we also did a study with Startup Labs and Y Combinator, what they have seen is that most of the entrepreneurs who really do get it big, who really get their break, are usually 28 years or older, and they usually have 6 or more years experience in the industry. Now, I was trying to make sense of why this would be the case, and then I thought about something that made so much sense. You know, a lot of times, especially for the younger entrepreneurs, you hear most people say, well, you have to pay your dues first before you can get to where you need to be. And so this is kind of what we're seeing. We're kind of seeing that the evidence is here. You have to have at least 5 or 6 years experience in your industry to know the different things that are going on, to know the trends, to know the right people who you need to get in contact with, to nurture those relationships. And you also have to have a history of being able to complete projects. That's one thing that I learned specifically at Georgetown. I know this is supposed to be what you learned outside of the classroom. One of the things that I did learn inside the classroom that I truly appreciate about Georgetown is they ingrained in us that we need to complete the things that we start. I feel like there are a lot of entrepreneurs, especially out here, at least that I've seen that we work with a lot of under 30 CEOs, that they're great at starting projects, they're great at being motivated, they're great at being confident, but when things get hard, they don't really have the chutzpah to go through and just kind of finish, you know, and ultimately, you know, if you don't do that, if you don't finish, if you don't stay hard, if you don't continue to concentrate, you're probably going to have a bad time. So project completion experience is great, and one of the things the young entrepreneurs specifically don't really get to have is the management experience, because a lot of times you're a first-time entrepreneur, you may have had an internship, you may have had a job somewhere, you may have led a group project, but when you really get into the real world, and you know, folks are asking things that you may not have done before, you're uncomfortable with doing, you have to be able to have the management experience and the chops to be able to take it to the next step. The second thing that we found in terms of traits, which I thought was really interesting, is creative or positive thinking. And the thing behind it is, can you see the hidden opportunities in every challenge? Can you be optimistic? Can you be intuitive? Can you think outside the box? If I had to put myself in any category, I would say that I'm probably of the creative entrepreneurial brand, in that I like to think of creative solutions to problems that I'm having or problems that someone else is having. So for example, I'll give you one of the businesses that I started at Georgetown. When I think I was a sophomore or junior, so I was about 20 or 21. I was a DJ, and I was doing different gigs throughout the city. I would do things, you know, in downtown. I would do things in American University, George Washington University, different things like that. So I was sitting with my mentor, Marlis Williams, and it was during Christmas one day, and we were just talking about, you know, how he wishes that he can DJ, but he had kids, so he wasn't able to do it. And I was talking like, yeah, I really like being a DJ, but I don't necessarily like being out in the clubs at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So is there anything that we can do in terms of, like, can you actually be a DJ and not actually be there? And then we both had this kind of idea, this concept for the company that was ultimately started then, which was called Remote DJs. We were like, well, can you actually not be at the party and actually do it? So what we found is we spent about 6.5 hours that day on Christmas. Was like Christmas, it was either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. I think it was Christmas Day. We sat and we coded for about 6.5 hours trying to come up with some kind of prototype for, is there a way where you can, as a DJ, not physically be at a party and still be able to put your music in your video? And this is ultimately what we came up with. Now, this is about 1.5 years later, so the graphics are better and things like that. But the concept that we had was Remote DJs, where a DJ could be at a club somewhere, he can be at his home, he can be at his home studio, and he can DJ a party in another city. We were doing this for about a good 2 or 3 years before I moved on to a different project. It wasn't that this business failed. It was more that there were a lot of people coming into the space, and we just didn't have the funding. So we ended up ultimately deciding to stop it. But this is one of the things, but it was a lot of fun when we were doing it. Was it a year or two ago? We were able to, one of the great things that I loved about this opportunity with Remote DJs is you could actually DJ a party. You can actually DJ multiple parties at a time. So it was one New Year's party I was doing where I was DJing a party in Los Angeles and I was DJing a party in Brooklyn. But at that time I was living in Austin, Texas. So like these were awesome opportunities that just kind of came out of nowhere because I was trying to solve a specific problem that I was having, in that I didn't necessarily want to be at the club till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning anymore, but I did love the music. So ultimately we were able to come up with this concept of Remote DJs. But another trait that you need to have as a successful entrepreneur is honestly flexibility and agreeableness, because I think some of the more seasoned entrepreneurs and the seasoned business people who are on the line can kind of tell some of the younger entrepreneurs that business itself is relatively simple. I mean, there's not a lot of reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of greasing the wheel so that you can do it in a new way. As they say, business is about marketing and innovation. But it's really about, business is simple, but it's not easy. It's pretty hard. So you have to be flexible. You have to be able to be straightforward, considerate, and cooperative with people. You have to have a positive attitude, those different types of things. This was the biggest one that I noticed, though, in terms of traits. Fluid intelligence. It's like, can you quickly learn a rule set and apply it to a novel problem? Now, that has a lot to do with like pattern recognition, logic, and abstract thinking, but it's hard to talk about abstract thinking in an abstract way, like in a way where I'm just going to tell you. So the best way that I can do is I can give you an example. I was working with Pam White, who is now the U.S. ambassador to Haiti, but when I was working with her, she was on the USAID team for Liberia. And what she was doing was something incredibly interesting. Now, she had done something previously in the country of Tanzania, and her particular project was, she was charged with, they were trying to figure out a way that they can get more individuals to, they were trying to stop the spread of HIV in Tanzania. And what they were trying to do was get more people to use condoms, but they couldn't do it no matter how hard they tried. And you can see her, she was here, I mean, literally giving out as many condoms as she possibly could, but people weren't using them. They were taking them, but they weren't using them, so we had to try something different. So there was a summit that was held, and that's Pam White there with the red area, and that's me to the right. And so the summit was, you know, what can happen? How can we do this? How can we use what is existing? How can we take what they already know, and how can we apply it to something new so that things can be changed, so that we can actually start to get the outcome that ultimately that is that we wanted? And the actual idea that came up was pretty ingenious. They had a concept in Tanzania. You know, they don't have a lot of radio. I mean, they don't have a lot of television. I'm sorry. The biggest thing that they have out there is a radio station. And so the idea that was brought up was that they were going to do an original webcast show in which they were calling this Mama Ushari, where there was a lady who jumped on the radio who served as a motherly figure for all of the women in Tanzania. And she would go on and she would tell them about all the men who were coming and sneaking in the doors at night to come have sex with you. And if they do, they should probably wear a condom and different things like that. It was straight education. It was straight content marketing. It was a beautiful thing, but the numbers that we saw in there was, first we saw the number of people who were actually getting affected by the disease go down at a number that was statistically significant, and the only thing that changed was this radio campaign. The other thing that we saw is more people were going to the doctor, more people were starting to eat better, and now this web series has been on for maybe about 5 or 6 years or so, and I just thought it was a very creative way, it was a very fluid way to take something that already existed and apply it to something else, to something that people would ultimately understand. Fluid intelligence is probably one of the greatest assets that you can have as an entrepreneur, but I will honestly say, from my experience and from most of the entrepreneurs who I talk to, resourcefulness is the biggest one. When I say entrepreneurship, a lot of, it's not about resources, as we can see, because was it last year, there were 6,614 businesses that were invested in, and I'm talking about $500,000 or more, so they have the resources that they need, some millions. I've talked to one entrepreneur who got a $40 million investment to work on a business that was similar to Gmail, but this was about 6 months before Gmail came out. So they had got investments from AOL, they had got investments from some pretty significant companies, they had a great partnership with Yahoo. Everything was looking great. They had the resources. They had all the relationships that they needed. But then Google came out and they were more resourceful, and they ultimately ended up taking it. So that $40 million they ended up losing. So can you take what you have, not the resources, but your ability to go out and make things happen with what you have, to be able to stay lean? Can you do those things? Can you get access to the important resources? Can you ask others for help? The best example that I've seen of resourcefulness actually didn't come from a company in the United States, but it was actually when I was in Egypt. And there's a certain part of Cairo in which we were in that it's called Garbage City. Now, I don't know how much you all know about Egypt and Cairo, but it's about 97-98% Muslim. The population of Garbage City is entirely Christian. So it's the biggest population of Christians in Egypt, or in Cairo, I should say. It's in this particular place called Garbage City, and it literally is that. There is garbage everywhere, and that you can go down the street, you can look into the buildings. Their entire economy, their entire way that they make money is based on cleaning up the trash of an entire city. And I do believe Cairo, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it has over 10 million people. and they handle all the trash. Now, what was truly interesting to me, and in my part, heartbreaking, was you would see piles of trash. I mean, like buildings high next to restaurants. You would see it next to schools. You would see it next to places where kids were playing. Trash is what was here. And these were, people who were like, they were Christians. They were, living in places and abject poverty. I just couldn't believe it. But then when I went there was this place that we went to with a young entrepreneur. Her name was Marissa Muhammad. And she had actually done something different. She had actually done something quite interesting. She was actually quite resourceful with what she had. She had started a small company. She had lived in Garbage City, and she started a small company, and she said, in what way can we take what we have here and do something positive with it? So the concept that they had is they took all the recycled paper that was there, because, I mean, tourism is incredibly large in Egypt. So she would take all the recycled paper, and she would combine it with flowers that she can find, old roses, any kind of like flower fragrancy type things. And what they would do is they would make these journals. So they would put these things in the water, they would wash them, they would put them on the trays, and what you would do is after you have the trays, you would shake everything so all the stuff settles, then you would put it down on a particular thing and you would flatten it out. And when you flattened it out, what it would ultimately turn into is a sheet of paper. And they would cut these pieces of paper up, and they would combine them, so it's recycled paper with rose petals and flowers and those different things. They would combine them to make journals, and they would sell them not just to tourists, but they had a company, they had an online, like it was a really great business that she had. But my thing was she was being incredibly resourceful at the time. It was about her making money. But the reason why she wanted to make money is because she had kids that lived in that neighborhood. Because the people who worked for this particular company had children in that neighborhood who wanted to eat better, who wanted to do different things with their lives, who were telling me stories about, the different things that they want to do. They want to be doctors and lawyers. They had the exact same dreams that we were. The only difference was they lived in a city, a part of the city, in which that was ultimately full of trash. And I saw so much happiness. I saw so much abundance. I saw so many great things there because I saw how resourceful they truly want to be. So I was like, if that could happen, we're literally in a place where people live in trash, and they're able to be resourceful enough to create successful companies, to smile every day, to feed their community, and we can ultimately do the same thing. Because this is what I want to tell you. Greatness is not about money. It never has really been about money. Greatness rarely recurs without a compelling enough motive to get to where you're going. So that's the M word we were looking for. It's motive. You have to have a good enough reason why. If you don't have a good enough reason why, if you don't have something that's going to wake you up every day, even when you're tired, even when you don't feel like doing these things, even when you run out of money, even when it looks like 30 days from now, because a lot of entrepreneurs, what newer entrepreneurs don't understand a lot of times is there are a lot of swings. There are a lot of things that you have to learn, and being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you make a bunch of money. A lot of times, I know I can speak for myself, and I can speak for other entrepreneurs who I interviewed who can tell you there are days when you are riding high, where you have where you are up, you're doing great, everything's doing well, your company's good. Then you go and it can literally be a month or 2 months or even 6 months down the line, and not only are you're not sure how you're going to feed your staff, but you're not sure how you're going to feed yourself. Your accounts go in the negative. There are so many different things that come up as an entrepreneur because we take so many risks. There are so many swings that you have that if you don't have a compelling enough reason why, if you don't have that drive, that hunger inside of you, then a lot of these things don't happen. Which leads me to, there have been so many, as a result of this, we talked to so many entrepreneurs, and we've gotten this from the interviews that we've done. So many entrepreneurs, especially in this day and age now with social media and all those other things, they're afraid to fail. But I just want to give a quick example here just to show that greatness most times requires failure. I can't think of one entrepreneur who I've ever met who started a single company, and that was the company that made them who they really wanted to be. There was always several chances that they had. We can look at Richard Branson here, who started multiple companies, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates. There have been so many people who have literally failed, who didn't know what they were going to do next, but then they didn't know that that next idea was going to be Facebook. They didn't know that that next idea was going to be Microsoft. They didn't know that next idea was going to be Virgin. So it gets hard, especially for new entrepreneurs. It does get hard for existing entrepreneurs who are working more in their business than on their business. We know it does get hard. But greatness requires failure sometimes, because sometimes it may be that next venture that you're doing that's really going to be the one that's going to get you on the path that you want to be in. It's going to get you on the right track. But let's say you aren't on the right track. Let's say you're you're kind of off track a little bit, what are some things that you can do to kind of turn yourself around? Well, when I work with, especially when I'm working with beginner clients, or when I just start working with someone, these are the 3 questions that we kind of go to kind of get yourself on track, to be able to figure out the different things that you want to do. The first question you got to ask yourself is, what is your outcome? Because remember, it's about motive. So when we're starting businesses, you have to ask, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? Now, if you're in the startup phase, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs are interested in, the question that you'll get asked a lot is, kind of what is your exit strategy? So you usually have to start with the end in mind, but what is the outcome that you want? Do you want to be a solo entrepreneur? Is this something that you want to do to sustain your life, to put your kids through college? Or are you trying to build something great? Are you trying to build a small corporation, or are you trying to build a large one? I can tell you incredibly detailed most entrepreneurs are about particularly what it is that they want, and the ones that aren't are usually the ones that fail. So knowing what your outcome is and knowing your motive is incredibly important. Having that reason why, having that hunger. I've talked to so many entrepreneurs, particularly one that I can think of right now. His name is Kenny Blunt. I mean, we had a great conversation about entrepreneurship, and you can just hear the hunger in his voice. Most of the entrepreneurs, you can't hide it. You can hear it. They have a hunger that's going to get them through the days. And they ask themselves always, what are the 5 or 10 things that I can do to take massive action? So if there's someone here that is on the line that's like, okay, well, I really do want to get into entrepreneurship, but I don't know how. Really, the exercise that we do is take 10 minutes on a sheet of paper and ask yourself, what is my outcome? What is it that I really want to achieve being an entrepreneur? Why do I want to do this? Why do I really want to become an entrepreneur? Is it about me getting rich? Is it about me building wealth? As we see, that's not, 95% of entrepreneurs never produce $1 million in revenue, so there has to be something else. And then how can you take action? What are 5 things that you can do today or in the next 30 days to really start moving towards whatever the ultimate goal it is that you want? If you can do those things, then you'll start to put yourself in a proper place. But the key to that is you have to be focused. You kind of have that focused intent. You got to have that. You got to have that drive and desire. So the last thing, and again, we're almost out of time here, so I want to make sure that we get to questions and everything like that. So this last thing, I want to run through this really quickly. So I'm going to talk a bit faster, but you're Georgetown, you're Hoyas, or if not, you know a Hoya, so I know you can listen a bit faster, right? So if you're having issues right now, you want to get into entrepreneurship, or maybe you want to try something new, you want to get into a new venture, you need to be able to find your focus. Here's a framework that I use with my personal clients, as well as folks at Edge Launch. We all use the same framework in terms of, it doesn't even necessarily have to be business. We use this with a lot of things, but it's how to find your focus, how to get honed in on the particular things that you want to achieve. The first thing that you need to do is you need to find your passion. When I say find your passion, I'm asking yourself, like, what is that one thing that you're most interested in? Whether it be solving a problem, whether it be building wealth, even inside of an organization. Do you want to be, are you more interested in finance inside of your organization? Do you want to be more of the leader, the team player? You have to find that one thing that you're passionate about, that one thing that drives you on the inside, that's going to make you wake up every morning and continue to do this. Once you do that, you need to organize your team. So if you're a regular entrepreneur, right, and you have a team and you have people who work for you, you can go through this session and have a great revelation, or you can have a revelation on your own, but I'm sure you've seen when you go to work the next day, a lot of those guys don't have the same motivation as you do because they didn't have the same revelation. So there needs to be something in which you can organize your team to give the new directive. Now, for the solo entrepreneurs who are out here, who a lot of times I hear, well, I don't have a team. Well, I would disagree. I truly believe that is true. I think you do have a team, and the acronym that we give is team. What are you focusing your time, your energy, your actions, and your money on? That's your team. If it's just you, then you can use those 4 things on any given day, your time, your energy, your actions, and your money, to help you achieve those goals. A lot of times when folks aren't achieving the kind of things that we want to, especially solo entrepreneurs, we ask them, well, okay, where are you spending your time? Oh, well, I've got this job that I really hate, so I can't really become a full-time entrepreneur. I'm like, well, do you think you probably can't be a full-time entrepreneur because you spend more time hating your job? Those kind of things. Like, where does your energy go? Does it go towards when you get home from work, you don't feel like doing anything, so you sit down and watch the television, or do you read for 20 minutes on whatever industry it is that you're in? So we're not saying you have to make huge sacrifices, but there are little small things that you can do every day as an entrepreneur to ultimately grow and have yourself be better. The third thing is, once you know that, you have to commit to a plan. You have to get everybody on the same page so that we can all move forward. Everybody's working from the same playbook. If you don't have everybody working from the same playbook, there's a lot of times you can get lost. And I'll give you a great example. Some of the older entrepreneurs, or some of the people who have been here, can understand this. I don't know if it, like, do y'all remember MapQuest? Because I remember it was a product started by AOL. It was great. The only thing about MapQuest is it would tell you everything about a city, but it would always get you lost. No matter how hard you tried, I swear to God, I could not find a way to figure out where I was trying to get on MapQuest. But then when Google Maps came out, it was a completely different thing. They gave you a completely different map. They gave you great directions. It was a great plan for you to follow. So sometimes, even if you're looking and you're here, and if you don't follow the right map, no matter how good your intentions are, you're not going to get there. If you have a map for the city of Detroit and you're in Los Angeles, it's not going to work. So you got to make sure you have a good plan. You got to make sure everybody has the same plan and we're all working together. The next thing is you have to make sure to utilize mentors. It's so hard to do this by yourself. And there are a lot of people who have been where you are, who have crossed the finish line, who would love to help you. At Georgetown, specifically, we have startup warriors. We have the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance. I'm available. I'll give you this. I'll give you my information at the end of this. But having a mentor is probably one of the most important things that I've ever done in terms of how to become a great entrepreneur, because it just helped me bridge, it helped me bridge the gap between so many things that I didn't even know that I didn't know yet. So when you just start new and there's things that you don't know, if there's somebody who can help you to get there, and it's so excellent to have it. The last thing that I want to say is it's a hard one to swallow, and it took me years to finally get this right. But you have to suspend your disbelief as an entrepreneur. There are so many things that we want to change. We don't do this for play. We really are doing this because we want to make a difference in the world. But a lot of times what we see is it's the entrepreneur's belief that is holding them back. It isn't necessarily the business model. It isn't the marketing. It isn't anything else. It's a belief that the leader has, that they can't do those kind of things. So when I say suspend disbelief, I just mean, honestly, if you can just spend 15, 20 minutes a day on your business, figuring out how you can better find your passions, figuring out how better ways that you can, organize and utilize your team, working on your plan consistently so they can be there, maybe spending a half an hour researching people that you can talk to who know something that you don't know so that you can ultimately get there. Just kind of doing those things every day to ultimately believe that you can do it is going to be the biggest difference, because no one else will believe it until you do. And so if you just repeat that process over and over again, if you just start this. So I asked, which one would you focus on first? You don't have to do all of these today. You can start on one a week. But just which one will you focus on first? Will it be finding your passion? Will it be organizing your team? Will it be any of these things? I feel like, honestly, if you do that, because I know we've given you a lot today, but honestly, if you do that, if you can just figure out that one thing that it is that you want to do and understand that being great is about motives. It's about motivation. It's about the why. It's about genuinely caring about the different things, who your customers are, and the difference that you want to make in the world. If you can do that, ultimately, you're going to be on the path to be a great entrepreneur, and there's no one that ultimately that can stop you. Because being great it's not hard. It's relatively simple. It's a dedication thing. You got to have a motive. So I'll leave you now, because we're out of time, with one final story. I was doing some work with the National Association of Investment Companies, which, it's venture capitals and different things like that. And we were sitting in on a day of investment pitches. And there were two companies that they were deciding that the particular business, the particular venture capital firm that I was working with, was deciding they wanted to invest in. But it was essentially the same company. It was a medical supply company. The two, they had a very similar product. So it was just a matter of which one did they want to invest in. And I want to give you a big secret that I didn't learn, and I'm glad I learned this being on that side of the table as opposed to the other side. One of the biggest things that venture capitalists do, bosses do, a lot of things, is if they can't decide between who they're going to hire, who they're going to invest in, they usually take the owners out to lunch. And they do it separately. But they do so because it gives you an opportunity for you to be able to let your hair down, kind of have a candid conversation. But when you're trying to give somebody $1 million, there's no candid conversation. Essentially what they're trying to do is learn who you are as a person. So we're at lunch with both of them, but I'll give you the first story. The first guy, he had an incredible presentation. Great slides. He had answered objections. In terms of somebody who you would want to have in a business like this to invest in, he did a really great job. And so we were talking to him during the lunch, and he's telling us why he got into the medical supply business, and he's talking about his revenues. He was talking about his 5-year plan. It was all great, but we can just hear it, and we can hear it that he was a wealth-minded individual. There's nothing wrong with that. We just heard it. It just kept going over and over again. Now, with the second person that we took out to lunch, who had a similar medical supply company, it was a bit different. His presentation wasn't as good. It was fine, but it just wasn't as, it just didn't have the same polish as the other guys did. But it was interesting when we took him out to lunch. What we learned was that particularly the reason why he had started the business is because his son had a disease that required this machine. And the machine that he was trying to use before was way too expensive, and his insurance didn't cover it. So what he decided to do was he wanted to create the machine himself. So he locked himself up as much as he could. After work, he would be there working an hour a day, 2 hours a day, and whatever time he had, developing a prototype for this particular machine. And after 6 months, he had got it developed. And on the 8th month, once he knew that this thing was going to be start being built and they were going to get it out in like 60 days, his son died of the disease that he had that the machine could have fixed. So he never had the opportunity to actually give his son the machine that hopefully would have saved his life. We never know because it wasn't there. But when we talked to him about it, because he was even tearing up when he was telling us his story. But the reason why he kept going was so interesting to me. He told me that, he told us essentially at the table, but I was listening, that he was doing it because he didn't want any other father, mother, son, daughter to go through the different things that he had went through in losing his son. He believed that his machine worked. He had doctors verify that it worked. And he wanted to make sure that in his son's name and his son's legacy that he could have something that could help others, because he wasn't able to help his son when he did. And if you saw it in his eyes, if you saw the tears, if you saw the passion, you would have known. And I think there's no surprise ultimately who those guys ended up investing in. It was the second guy, the one who had the real reason why, the one who had the good motivation. And ultimately ended up having a successful company. It went incredibly well. He ended up selling the company about 5 or so years later, so ended up doing very well. But he really did have that. He really did have that motivation. So I just kind of ask yourself, what's that motivation that you have? What's that hunger? What's that drive? What's that emotional reason? If you can figure that out and you can start on that today, then I know that there's nothing that you can't achieve, especially when you're in the Hoya network and there are so many people who are here to help you. So I do want to say thank you. That is the end of my formal presentation. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, those different things. Also, we did a good amount of research for this, more research than I can actually put into this presentation, but there were some startling numbers on there that was actually called, what we had was like the top 4 or 5 threats that are facing entrepreneurs in 2014. I mean, it was some really scary stuff in there, but it was beyond the scope of this presentation. If somebody's interested in that, I think what we can do is you can go to entomology.com/Georgetown. And for this particular webinar that we have, just put your information in there, because if enough people ask for it, what I think ultimately I'm going to do is I'm going to have those guys go and put up another presentation together, something like this, or some slides or a report that I can send out to people who are interested in on the top 4 or 5 threats that are facing entrepreneurs in 2014, as well as how to solve them. I know we're using that with some of the clients that we have now, but I'm more than happy to give that to Georgetown folks. There's one last thing that I will say, and I just want to publicly thank some people. Again, this was about what I learned outside the classroom. But I do want to say that there were so many professors, there were so many administrators in Georgetown who did phenomenal things for me in terms of me on my journey as an entrepreneur. So I want to publicly thank Professor Mike Ryan, who was my Fundamentals of Finance professor. I want to thank Dee McWade, who was the Dean of Student Financial Services, who was integral when I wrote my first book and helped me to, she had Georgetown buy several copies of it. She had me doing speeches. Was a really great person. I'm forever grateful to her. And Professor Finity as well for being my entrepreneurship professor. He taught me so many things, and I would also like to thank the people who I personally interviewed for this particular kind of thing. So with that now, I'm going to leave those there for a second so these guys know, and then I would just like to open it up for questions if we have any, Sarah. So.
Absolutely, Marcus. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and for making all of this information available to fellow Hoyas. The first question is, by the way, this person loves your candor and wants to know the 3 things that you do or focus on to get your motivation back fast.
3 things that I do to get my motivation fast. I really, honestly, the first thing that I do is I understand that fear, like the bark, is worse than the bite. So if I do lose my motivation, there's usually a reason behind it. So I really do try to spend some time figuring out what that is. Whatever that reason may be, and it's usually some kind of fear. It's some kind of limiting belief that's inside of you that's making you not motivated to do the things that you want to do. So the first thing is I uncover what that is. Then the next thing is I go and I ask myself those 3 questions again. What is my outcome? What is my reason for doing all of these things? And then what are 2 or 3 or 5 things that I can do right now to get myself out of this slump that I'm in? Because no one's ever going to make you feel better. As an entrepreneur, you're going to realize it's just like being single. There are so many days where you're going to feel lonely and alone, and you're going to be the best ones to kind of get yourself to kind of pull yourself out of that situation. But it's really about asking yourself the right questions, because if you can change the state that you're in, because if you say I'm not motivated, then you're not going to be motivated. But if you say, okay, what is my outcome? What is my reason for doing these things? And then what are the actions that I can take? Then it becomes a lot easier.
Okay, great. And how can an entrepreneur move forward with an idea if they don't personally have the technical expertise to design or create the product they have envisioned?
You would get a co-founder. Is the easiest way to do that. I think you know, you can spend 6 months learning the code, which I do believe if you want to be an entrepreneur, especially in the startup phase, it's good. But then also, and Sarah, you may be able to help me with this because I don't remember the name, but I know that the Startup Hoyas and Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance, they have a tool where you can go in. I mean, it's just Hoyas. It's just people who are in the Georgetown network who have businesses. Some of them have the technical knowledge. Some have the business development. Some have the marketing. If you don't have it, I don't know how old you are personally, but you know, it may take a long time to learn it. It may take a lot less time to find somebody else who you can trust to kind of help you do it if you do give them a piece of the business. And usually if you do work with a co-founder, it's a lot better because, you know, two heads are always better than one, and you all will come up with ideas that you had never had before, just from the creativity that comes from those kind of sessions.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about learning new skills, how do you feel about graduate school for entrepreneurs and how that fits into a vision?
Graduate school to me personally is a very expensive investment, and I know I'm talking at a university conference, but you put yourself in a lot of debt to become, you know, to get your MBA or to get the kind of continuing education, which I'm not saying don't do. I'm just saying being very specific about what it is that you're trying to do when you go in there. Like, just kind of have a plan before you start. I love the idea of continued education. I learn something new every day. I don't go to an MBA type program. Georgetown has a great MBA program that you can definitely learn. Just, you know, just understand that when you go back to school, you're learning a brand new skill set. I think one of the things that I've learned most outside of the classroom about becoming an entrepreneur is that a lot of times when you're in business school or when you're in an MBA, you learn a lot of case studies. You learn a lot of things in which, you know, you can kind of apply to your own business, but it's still more case-based. It's not more you're kind of in the thick of it every day. There's so many things that you will learn inside of business school that that doesn't necessarily translate into actually being an entrepreneur. And then there are things that you're going to learn, I mean, your first day as an entrepreneur, that you're going to be like, wow, they never said anything about this in business school. So just be pretty specific, and when you're there, utilize mentors, like utilize people who have been there, your professors who are in business. And don't just go to the class and ask questions or participate because they're asking you, but like use them as best as you can. I mean, if you're investing $50,000 a year, if you're investing 3 years of your life, you know, I'm going to try to use whatever resource I can. So just have a great plan and utilize the people who are there who can ultimately mentor you so that you can get exactly what you want out of the experience.
And a follow-up question to that, do you have an advanced degree? And if not, have you had to present a certain way or deal with internal limiting beliefs around not having a degree, an advanced degree?
Well, I would say that honestly, and this is, I appreciate this so much, is no, I don't have an advanced degree in that, you know, a JD, an MBA, or anything like that. But I do have a degree from Georgetown University, which has got me in any door that I've ever cared to get into. I mean, I've met presidents. I've met heads of state. Like, I've met so many people that all I had to say was I was at Georgetown University, like I was a Hoya, and they would go, oh, that's great. You know, they love Georgetown. So for me, I've been extremely blessed in that, you know, especially when you're just getting started. And I don't know the person who asked the question, so they may be new or they may not be new, but I know the credentials question that usually comes up is because it's a lack of experience, or sometimes it's a lack of confidence. I know I definitely had it in the beginning, but what I found at least is that if you know what you're talking about genuinely, and if you can back it up with actual data, like it's not just you flying off the cuff, but you've got the data you've shown, then people don't really care so much about certifications and significance. Like, really, people who only care about the letters after their name are the people who have the letters after their name, or the people who are paying, or like who you are paying to get those at the end. I mean, I've worked with so many different entrepreneurs who never cared. It's really about results. If you can get somebody results, then it doesn't matter what your name is, even if they do remember it. Like, I have people who have been working with me who they get my name wrong all the time, but we still make more money than they care to mention, so it doesn't really matter so much. It's just a matter of, you know, just having the confidence to getting out there and genuinely going after what you want. And if you can't my thing is, and here's the guarantee that I always give people when I work with them, just to kind of go full circle with this, is we can work together for, I think it's like a 30 days for a month. We have a plan, and if at any point during that 30 days you see that, like, this isn't working, this isn't what you asked for, then I'll give you your money back. And once you do that, people don't care about credentials anymore. It's more about the results that they're looking for. So as long as you can provide results, you're pretty good.
Absolutely. And any reason that you differentiate or focus more on entrepreneurs under 30? This is coming from a 44-year-old entrepreneur on the line. Do you think there are different challenges?
I do believe there are slight nuances. There are slight challenges. I believe that the reason why I focus on under 30 CEOs more than anything is just kind of branding. I feel like business is business. The kind of principles that we use honestly can be applied to just about any business. And you got so many people who go, well, my business is different. But a lot of times there are plenty of things that are the same. So I think under 30 CEOs particularly is because I'm under 30. A lot of my friends and the people I've worked with and the mastermind groups that I've been in and the people I mentor are under 30. So you got to choose a niche. It was, it could have been that I was trying to please everybody, which you can't do. So it was really, I like the audience. I like under 30 CEOs. They have a different mindset about how they approach entrepreneurship now. They're more startup-based. They're more lean-based. In business, especially if you work with bigger companies, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. You can be ready to go today, but then something takes them 2.5 months to respond to an email or give something back to you, or it takes 3 months or 6 months for a project to be launched. Usually under 30 CEOs are quicker to implement, and I like people who can implement things as quickly as possible, so that's why I chose to work with them. But I do believe that the principles that are in here, and I do work with people who aren't under 30 CEOs, but I really just try to keep it to that just for the speed of implementation. But this applies to any business.
Okay, and are you familiar at all with supplier diversity initiatives?
Supplier diversity initiatives. Kind of, but I don't think enough where I'm going to be on a recorded webinar talking about it.
Okay. This person was just wondering if you recommend entrepreneurs to leverage the initiative for growth. But if not that organization, what are some other resources outside Startup Hoyas and the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance that you suggest people are leveraging and becoming a part of?
There are so many, which is why I really did try not to give resources, because it really is based on what business you may be in, because there are different sources. One of the things that we use now that we're seeing a lot of success with, and it's not entrepreneurial based, it's more if it's project management based in terms of getting your team to commit to a plan and everyone being on the same page, is the technology that we use called Trello, Trello. And it's probably the best project management system that we've seen to date that not only helps you to organize your team, but it also helps you to organize your clients or your customers or any number of things. So that's one of the tools that we're using right now that's rocking and rolling. The best advice that I can honestly give, because every person is different, every entrepreneur is different, every situation is different. So if you do have additional questions, by all means, please contact me. You can register at entomology.com/Georgetown, which is where we're going to be giving a lot more information. And then I'll also give you my direct email address here, marcus@entomology.com, if you do have any additional questions, maybe specifically related to your business. But the best that I can say is, look at the different trends that are in your industry. Look at the trade journals that are there. Speak to the people who are in your industry, because they can tell you a lot better about the things that are going on, the resources that are working, than I could over a webinar. But when I do talk to you specifically, though, I'm sure there are 10 more answers that I can give you. But just if I tried to give one answer for everyone, it probably wouldn't work.
Okay, great. And Marcus, for any young alums or students that are on the line right now, do you have any advice of when you were back in the classroom, anything you would have done differently when you were first sort of getting out of the gates?
Nope. I don't. But I'll say it like this. I honestly mean it. There's nothing that happened in my life that hasn't gotten me to the point where I am now, and I'm very happy with where I am now, and that includes all the mistakes. So, again, the entrepreneur's journey is not without failure. So there are things that may seem like it may be the worst thing ever in the moment that 6 months later, as you look at it, you go, holy crap, like I genuinely learned so much from that situation. So, there are things that I could have done differently. Like, for example, with the company that I had, Remote DJs, I didn't put it in the formal presentation, but a lot of reasons why that company kind of faded out was not necessarily because it wasn't a great idea, because it was, and it wasn't that I didn't have access to funding, because I did. Excuse me, but my mentors, they were yelling at me for years. They were like, Marcus, you have $1 million idea here. Will you just focus? But I'm like, well, I'm 21. I got a girlfriend. You know, I'm DJing. Like, I wasn't as focused as I necessarily had needed to be. So, I mean, just understand that when you're a student, you have time to make mistakes. You have time to try different things that may not necessarily be working. You don't have to have your entire life figured out yet. So here's a great time to experiment and test. That's what I did in college a lot. No one told me that I couldn't do the things that I was trying to do, so I just kept doing them. And as a result, you know, 7.5 years later, I've been doing entomology for 7.5, almost 8 years now. And it's really been a blessing, but it's been because, you know, I've learned from the School of Hard Knocks. They didn't teach me this in the book. I had to just go out and do it myself.
Absolutely. All right. Well, wonderful. Marcus, thank you so much for sharing all of this advice and insights today. We do have a winner who did get the motivation question right at the beginning. We had a lot of people type it in, so I feel bad choosing a winner, but the first person to get it right was Tracy Ferguson. So Tracy, if you will email me, sah106@georgetown.edu, or respond to the webinar follow-up email, then we will get you that gift card from Marcus. So
congratulations.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And as I said before, if you can get online and support the GU City Challenge today, please do that. And we have many other webinars that we've sponsored with the Entrepreneurship Alliance. So go on the YouTube channel, look at the Entrepreneurship playlist, check out Marcus's webinar, as well as some other sessions that relate into this as well. So best of luck to everyone with their businesses, and have a wonderful day. Marcus, best of luck in Los Angeles. I hope you enjoy the West Coast.
Thank you so much. And let's get started on this Hoya Challenge. I mean, we really do have 3 days, and I know it's a great cause that we can do a lot for. I'm definitely going to participate in the challenge as well today. So if there's any entrepreneurs who can ultimately help, it's a great thing. So Hoya Saxon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.